Last week of this study, worship. It is fitting because, in my opinion, worship is the conclusion, the culmination, the response to all the other stuff that we have been learning. So if you take back the last few months of all the stuff that we have learned, worship should be the response to that. Would you just leave your dumb cats alone?
No, what's wrong with her?
She's
like, I didn't feed you yet.
She's like, Mom, you stop.
But unfortunately, which Tiffany will love me for this, worship is one of my least favorite words in the entire world.
Because people pronounce it worship?
Well, now it is the least favorite word ever in the world.
They go worship.
No, it is on a short list with the word love being number one. Worship is number two. I have absolutely detested using the word worship. It is so overused and abused, almost as overused and abused as love, which of course you guys know I just don't even use the word love anymore. If I'm talking about, agape, I just say agape. And if people don't know what I'm talking about, they can ask me and I'll tell them and it's fine. As opposed to just saying love all the time for literally everything and people thinking that they know what I'm talking about and they have no idea what I'm talking about. So I'd rather them ask so I can clarify than for them to think that they know what I'm talking about just because I used a familiar word. Unfortunately, worship does not have a really nice, catchy Greek or Hebrew word that I can use. They're not catchy words at all. It's a little more irritating because I just don't use it very often. But yeah, so it's a bit overused. It's another one of those English words, and I threw the English definition in there. It's actually definition number 4 in Webster's, which I found interesting. At least the way that we use the word is the 4th definition, which is kind of odd. But it comes from the root word that means worthy. So worship and worthy are similar words. They come from the same roots or whatever, which is also kind of interesting. That does resonate with us. And it's a response to the worthiness of somebody. And then so he goes into the 4th definition, chiefly and eminently the act of paying divine honors to the supreme being, or the reverence and homage paid to him in some religious exercise, consisting in adoration, confession, prayer, thanksgiving, and the like. I thought it was interesting. It begins with reverence and homage, but then he adds a list of things that could be honoring to God in place of or as a result of this reverence or homage. And these are 2 words that we will see a lot in going through this study. Reverence and homage. And we'll actually get to the end. They're not really bonus words, but I put in the definitions of those English words as well, so that by the time we're done beating those words to death tonight, we'll actually have the definition of those words as well, which is one of those things. I mean, it becomes a pet peeve with me because in English, we like to make up collective words. So if there are 4 or 5 perfectly good words that have perfectly good meaning, but they're similar, we like to, maybe it's not even an English thing, maybe it's an American thing. We like to lump all of that together, just mash it all together and then give it a token word that kind of just is the label for the pool of all those different things. And I was like, well, reverence and homage are very good words. They're not weird words. They're not strange old words. They're not any of those things. They're just good words. Why can't we just use one of those words? Why do we have to lump them together and give them a summary word that doesn't really mean anything except those words? So definition of worship in English is reverence or homage. So why can't we just use reverence or homage and keep those words with their meaning instead of making up a new word that kind of means that, and then we can just use it for whatever we want, kind of like love ended up. And a lot of the other words that we've studied, they kind of just run amok on their own because we made up the word. So if we make up the word, then we can also make up the meaning of the word. And then, of course, it starts to do the normal linguistic flow, which is where it kind of just snowballs and changes its meaning with usage over time. And it doesn't, nothing ever gets better that way. Depending on how people use it. And then if you use it enough, and especially in today's day and age, use it on the internet, then of course everybody thinks that that's what it is, because now you got 50 billion views on your, TikTok video or whatever, where you use this word really stupid like. And so now everybody thinks that that's how the word's supposed to be used. And now you just changed an entire culture and the dictionary all in one video.
Oh,
Oh, golly. Yeah, satisfy.
Satisfying.
That's
Sorry, just had to poke that button.
yes. Unfortunately, these things are both super profound studies that I learn an incredible amount about God's word, but they also trigger my nonsense buttons so much that I usually kind of steam for a little while. And why are we stupid? Why do we do these things? I've been steaming about this word for lots and lots and lots of years, because some of it is parental. My father loves this word. He uses it for everything. Worship through tithe, worship through music, worship through greetings, worship through song, worship through preaching, worship through, he puts it in all of his bulletins, everything, worship through everything. And I'm just like,
Live, laugh, love.
none of that has anything to do with anything. You just like using the word. It's just overused. But these are phenomenal and powerful and profound concepts throughout Scripture that I think you're going to really, really enjoy getting into. There is a little bit of some rabbit trails in here. But I've tried to keep them short and on topic, which I know is probably not the definition of a rabbit trail, but maybe they're just potential rabbit trails. All right, so 4 words, potentially 4 words, technically 3 words, in the Old Testament in Hebrew that are translated usually as worship, okay? And so shakah, probably with a nice shakah in there. You gotta have a little phlegm with Hebrew. So this is the token Hebrew word that is used 172 times. This is the word that when we think of worship, when it's translated worship, when we read the word worship in the Bible, 9 times out of 10, this is the word that you're going to be running across. Okay. Again, I'm keeping the Strong's numbers in there so you guys can look those words up if you want, and then look at all the different references for them. I did not put 172 verses in the packet. You can look. I almost did. Yeah, there are a few extra pages, but you'll find out why I did that here in a second. So this word shakah, so it means to bow, to prostrate, or to pay homage. Okay, it's a very simple word, but it has a significant meaning that I feel has been watered down pretty significantly. But when the Bible talks about bowing down to idols or paying homage to a king, this is the word that is used. It means a physical act of humble respect. It means to get on your face in reverence to something. It's not figurative, okay? Anytime you've read the concept in the Bible of people bowing down to idols, these are literal people literally bowing down to a statue, okay? It's not a figurative thing where it's like, well, we're just talking about our souls, just bowing down to these things and just giving these things priority in our life. It has zero to do with any of that. It is literally a physical word that means to physically bow, to put your face on the ground, prostrate, to bow or to pay homage to somebody, which in itself, again, when we start taking the real words with the real meanings, every time we're seeing this word worship, or when we're seeing this idea of idols and or of royalty or some high figure. We see it with Abraham, and others who have bowed themselves out of respect and reverence to other individuals, whether it be kings or messengers or whoever. But we see this concept a lot in the Old Testament, especially. We see it quite an awful lot in the New Testament as well. And there's a word for that. But it is a simple word. And some of it we have to kind of retrain our brains to kind of go back in time, because we like to associate things with how our world works. And our world, especially in America, does not work this way. Nobody bows to anybody. In Asian cultures, there's a lot of respectful bowing. Instead of shaking a hand, it's a simple bow. And the person who bows, even on business trips and things like that, you have to learn those customs and cultures to find out what that means and what you should be doing and how you should be doing it. There's royalty all over the world. And there are people who bend a knee, kiss a hand. They actually bow. Not so much in what we would consider a worshipful sense, but but that's not really what they did either. That's not really how the word worked. But this reverential bowing and demonstrating that something has this higher place, that you are lesser, is very prevalent even in today's world in many, many cultures. But especially if we kind of, take a brain trip back in the past and think about like medieval times or, these types of things where like, okay, well, you're allowed into the courtroom to meet the king or the queen, so you're going to get on your face, and let them invite you to stand back up. But you're not just going to walk up to them and be their equal and look them in the eye. That's not your place. You're not royalty. And so there's this kind of status, it's the serfs and the peasants and the royalty and the nobility and all of that stuff. There's definitely a class system even today all over the world that's not prevalent in America. And that's America's kind of new cool thing, that we were built on the fact that there's no class systems in America. That's what made America. Anybody can come over here and be any class they want to. If you're a peasant, you'll never amount to anything. You'll never own land. You'll never do any of that stuff, in England. But you can come over here, and if you work, you work for somebody as an indentured servant, your payoff will be land. And so as a peasant who will never own land and never have status, have the opportunity to break that so long as you're willing to work hard enough for it. You can buy land, you can earn land, and land was the status of nobility, and the higher, whatever higher classes were and all that stuff typically revolved around land. And in these systems, King David owned everything. The peasants in the outer, walls and in the outer areas of his kingdom, he could take whatever land he wanted. He'd take anything he wanted to, including the women on the roof, including whatever. He was the king. Everything was owned by him. And everything else was borrowed basically by everyone else. And so, I love getting kind of a time traveling mentality, so you can really get your brain wrapped around, this is not weird. This is normal. People bowing to one another and paying respect to people, showing reverence to people. There's very little respect and reverence left in our culture, but there is still formalities and reverence left in other cultures. One of the things I loved about the military culture was that there was a class system. There was a hierarchy. There were ceremonious respect paid to people simply because of what their status or their rank was. And there were different ways of greeting people based on what their status was. I just found that to be very, very cool. Some of the same reason I really enjoyed the biker clubs and that type of stuff. Again, it's a military, kind of focused environment. But you see these things, respect is paid to someone as it's given, and respect is given by the titles and the positions that you have earned. And we've got, bosses, and we've got, corporate, chain of command and things like that. But there's almost no one in America, as the male clerk who wouldn't walk into the CEO's office and talk to him like his drinking buddy, which frankly, he could be his drinking buddy, whatever. And that is a point of pride in America, that this is okay. This is what we've created in America, is that we don't need to have separation in titles. Just because you're the CEO and I'm the janitor doesn't mean that we can't also be drinking buddies, or fishing buddies or whatever we do, and we just happen to, work in the same place. You just happen to own the place and I just happen to sweep the floors, but we're still equal. And so unfortunately, there's no real reverence in that position in America. We actually invite the closing of that gap in America. And that's not true in most other countries, which I don't really have an opinion on all of that. I think both are of value, but I think if we can find some way to visit those other cultures, we will understand this much, much better. So anyway, so that will help us to sort out the rest of this and make some sense of it. The next word is segid. It's actually technically Aramaic. It's not Hebrew. So if you'll forgive me for that. It's used 12 times. It's only ever used in the book of Daniel. It's the only place it's used. It means to do homage. And it's almost always translated as worship, but it does not mean what the English has become. It should be actually translated as homage, of course, in my opinion, because that's what it means. We have the word homage. The actual literal translation of that word in Aramaic is the English word homage. It's a literal translation. Why do we translate it, 9 of the 10 times or 11 of the 12 times as worship? I don't know. The word means homage. And homage is a great word. It's a really impactful word. And it's, it has all the meaning that it needs. And when Daniel uses it, it's there. And if you're wondering, the next page has the definition for homage, and the page after that has the definition for reverence. I know things. I know things.
What were you looking at? I was getting ready. I was looking up the definition of homage.
Yeah, which actually, let's go ahead and bounce over to page 2 and 3. And just because again, we are going to be absolutely just beating these words to death. So we may as well touch them first. So homage is, in feudal law, it's the submission, the loyalty, the service which a tenant promised to his lord or superior when first admitted to the land which he held of him in fee. So indentured servanthood, that type of understanding, the feudal system, or rather the act of a tenant in making this submission on being invested with the fee. The ceremony of doing homage was thus performed. The tenant, being ungirded and uncovered, kneeled and held up both his hands between those of the Lord who sat before him, and there professed that he did become his man from that day forth of life and limb and earthly honor, and then received a kiss from his Lord. It's the concept of obeisance, so respect paid is an external thing, and reverence. And so with homage, having one of its definitions is the word reverence, which we've already seen in even Webster's. The definition of worship is homage and reverence. Well, the definition of homage is reverence. So we got that one in there too. It means fear mingled with respect and esteem, veneration. It is reverence is nearly equivalent to veneration. Veneration means being in awe. Okay. So the fear acceptable to God is a filial fear and awful reverence. FYI, side note for the word nerds, awful actually means awful. It doesn't mean bad. The word literally means full of awe, awful. Why it now means that it's horrible, I do not know. But the word actually means awful.
You go, aw.
Maybe. I don't know. Not awe, not A-A-H, A-W-E. Aw. Not aw. Aw.
That's crazy.
But yeah, so anyway, so that's the concept of reverence. It is this this esteem, this show of veneration, this sense of awe about somebody. Again, not fear I'm afraid of, but fear as in I understand the effects of someone who is so powerful, which causes the fear, not oh you're scary like Halloween, which again, two words that mean completely different things that we use the same word for. I guess that's why we have multiple definitions, but regardless. Or it is an act of respect or obeisance, a bow, or some sort of courtesy, and there's a cross reference there. So again, this is a physical, so homage, this is a physical sign of humility. In fact, came from the feudal system where it was actually a ceremonious physical act of humility, where it is a person who is ceremoniously declaring that you are my Lord and I am your servant forevermore. And so you've got this hierarchical thing that is voluntary, willful, and very meaningful. That amazing humility to say, you are my master, I am your servant, and I will be faithful to you forever. That's homage. And so when Daniel is using this word 12 times, homage is what he's talking about. It is this ceremonious understanding of someone's commitment to be a servant towards this person. So that's homage. Combine that with reverence, which is this fear and respect, this awe of somebody's position and power and all of that. Whether it's a king, whether it's God, whatever it is, this person has this whole thing going on, and we are in awe of that and humbled by it. And so these are the words that are really used. Again, there's no reason why they couldn't still be used. They're English words. They're just regular old English words. But they are the exact thing that these Hebrew and Greek words mean. And of course, we've changed it to worship, which we can get caught in that backward cycle that we've been talking about, where we go, oh, yes, because worship, that's what it means. It's this when we're, no. Worship, we took that's what homage and reverence mean. We've categorized them and called them worship. But if we say, well, that worship, that's what worship means. No, worship means this, not this meaning that. So we don't want to get those backwards because it's easy to do. And you go, oh, well, that makes sense. This is the picture that we've built in the idea of worship. And that's not wrong. That's why we have the word worship, except that the word worship doesn't mean all the other things that we've made it mean. It means reverence and homage. The Bible means reverence and homage when it uses these words. And so by understanding that, I think it'll carry us a lot further. All right, so jump back into the Hebrew real quick. So that's the Aramaic word. There's a similar word. It's basically the same. Aramaic is kind of like, I don't want to say a slang version of Hebrew, but it's kind of a simpler, more common use. So they're related is what I'm saying. Aramaic and Hebrew are related languages. One is typically considered more of a common language, but Aramaic was used worldwide in their world anyway during that period, which is why Daniel wrote in Aramaic, because even the Babylonians and the Jews and all of they all understood Aramaic because they had spent so much time in captivity that everyone kind of understood. There was kind of like Greek became the common language of that area of the world in the Roman Empire. Aramaic was a very common language throughout that whole region where Israel spent most of its time in captivity, especially during those minor prophet periods, pretty much that whole period in captivity because they were kind of dumb. So the Hebrew version of that word is the word sagad. So very similar spelling, very similar pronunciation. It is actually only used in the book of Isaiah. It's used 5 times in the entire Bible. All 5 times are in the book of Isaiah. And it's kind of the root word where the Aramaic word sagid comes from. And it means to physically bow down. So we've got this word picture of homage, where this person is kneeling, and there's this whole, this imagery there. That imagery comes from the physical kneeling or bowing, which is what sagad means. Isaiah uses it only 5 times. Again, it's the only 5 times it's used in the whole Bible. It is always used in reference to people making things out of wood and stone and physically bowing down to them. And he's saying you should stop that. And so it's never, this particular word is never used in reference to God. It's never used in, it's actually all 5 times it is used as it pertains to people carving idols and physically bowing down to them as part of their regular practices. But so basically, shakah is our word that means that we translate to worship. That's the normal kind of word that we use, which of course means reverence or homage. It means to physically bow down, to physically lower yourself in respect or reverence to somebody or something, I guess, in that case. But that's why I think a lot of these other authors, have used some other words that also mean physical kneeling or bowing, but they use them in reference to idols and other things. Maybe those were intentional word choices so that they didn't get shakah, mixed up with this word sagad. There is a term that means a word that's only used, one time, because there are a couple of those. Luke uses a lot. Luke being a physician, a very, very educated man. He uses language in his gospel that isn't used anywhere else in the Bible. Probably his vocabulary was significantly higher than those fishermen. So he's responsible for those things. These are also similar. I can't remember that term. I tried to look it up and didn't know how to ask that question. But it's like a word that's only sometimes but not very often. I didn't even know where to begin. But anyway, there is actually a term for that, for words that are only ever used once by one person. And then we just never, Hebrew is a fairly large language, but it's spoken by a lot of people over a lot of time. And you would think that somebody would have found that word before, but these guys found a word that nobody else in history in the Bible had ever chosen before.
Why can't we just make up letters to make up different words that don't exist?
I think that's exactly what English does. We just make up letters and words.
Red, or, or, you know what I mean?
English be kooky. I don't know. Why do we do that? I don't know why we do that. That's not how I would make a language if I were to make a language. I think. Maybe.
I would
don't
love
know.
for you to make
Be deep and deep. Deep
language.
deep.
a
Yeah, I would
language.
have to adopt the word retarded though, unfortunately. It's a beautiful word. All right, anyway, I'll digress maybe a little.
Sorry.
All right, so the fourth word, this one is actually kind of an add-on word. It's a transitional word to get us into the Greek because it's a cross-reference word. The word is always translated fear in the Old Testament, always. It kind of brings in this concept of reverence that we were talking about, this idea of fear, and it's used a ton. It's a very, very commonly used word in the Old Testament. It's never translated worship. So why is it in here? The reason why it is in here is because in Matthew 15:9, Jesus quotes the book of Isaiah. And so we can go ahead and look up Isaiah 29:13. So we don't just have to talk about it. We can actually just read it and get it out of the way. So yeah, Isaiah 29:13. This is Isaiah's warning to Jerusalem, one of the bajillion. But he's going through each of the tribes and warning them, giving them prophetic warnings. And then he gets to the city of Jerusalem and gives them a warning. And so in verse 11, the entire vision will be to you like the words of a sealed book. When they have given it to one who is literate, saying, please read this. And he will say, I cannot, for it's sealed. And the book will be given to the one who is illiterate, saying, please read this. And he will say, I cannot read. And then the Lord said, because this people draw near with their words and honor me with their lip service, but they remove their hearts far from me, and their reverence for me consists of tradition learned by rote. Therefore, behold, I will once again deal marvelously with this people, wondrously marvelous, and the wisdom of their wise men will perish, and the discernment of their discerning men will be concealed. So my version translates that word reverence. Others translate it fear. But in verse 13, where it says, but they have removed their hearts far from me, and their reverence or their fear for me consists of traditional ceremonies that they memorized. So the extent of Israel's respect for God was in feasts and fasting, days of remembrance, ceremonial things. And it had nothing to do with actually respecting God or having any fear for him whatsoever. And so this is where a lot of this punishment comes from. Well, so in Matthew 15, if you flip over there, Jesus quotes this prophecy of Isaiah and said, so some of the Pharisees and scribes came to Jesus from Jerusalem, and they said, why do your disciples break the tradition of the elders? For they do not wash their hands when they eat bread. And he answered and said to them, why do you yourselves transgress the commandment of God for the sake of your tradition? For God said, honor your father and your mother, and he who speaks evil of his father and mother is to be put to death. But you say, whoever says to his father or mother, whatever I have that would help you has been given to God, he is not to honor his father or mother. And by this you have invalidated the word of God for the sake of your tradition. You hypocrites. Rightly did Isaiah prophesy of you. Remember what Isaiah's prophecy was for. Who was it for? Jerusalem. Where did it open up and say that he was? The Pharisees and scribes from Jerusalem came to him. And then they wanted to talk about their traditions, their rote, memorized ceremonies, their traditions. And the Pharisees challenged him that his disciples were not following the respectful traditions, the washing of the hands that show respect. And he challenged them, as every good rabbi does, about their teaching. And then he calls them hypocrites. He said, Isaiah has prophesied rightly of you when he said, these people honor me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. But in vain do they worship me. That's not what Isaiah said at all. Isaiah did not say worship. Isaiah said reverence or fear. They didn't fear me.
Version, it says say worship in Isaiah.
Good for you. Oh, your Isaiah verse uses worship?
Yeah.
Interesting. I searched through a ton of translations and could not find one that translated the word Yahweh into worship.
What was the Isaiah verse 29 what?
29:13. Which is, it's mentioned a number of times within the handout, both under the word Yahweh as well as
Is it
in.
the word honor? Is that what you're talking about? Mine says honor. Is that in 13?
Really?
Because if people draw near with their mouth and honor me with their lips.
Maybe.
That's why I didn't know.
Mine says honor there as well. When-
Okay,
as you go-
interesting.
As you go forward, but their hearts are far from me. Their worship of me is based on merely human rules they have been taught.
So it should be so they're where it says their fear of me is based on things that they memorize or things have wrote.
And their
That's
fear,
what it should
that's
be.
the word.
Yeah, the word fear there is the word yare.
Gotcha. I see.
Which is interesting that yours does translate that worship. That is
Yeah.
very rare. Very, very rare. Because again, it's not the word that the Old Testament shakah uses for worship.
Yeah.
It is a word that is only, the meaning is fear and reverence, which is super, super interesting. But it's funny because almost all translations use fear or reverence. And then when it comes to the New Testament and he's quoting fear or reverence, they translate it worship. And I was like, well, that's because again, we get an idea in our head what worship means, and we apply it into there. And that's not what Isaiah said at all. It's not shakah. If it was shakah, then I would go, oh, that's interesting, because they bow down to me in ceremonies that they memorized, but that's not what he's saying. He's saying that Isaiah is saying that their fear and respect for God, their ceremonious respect, was something that was memorized, not something that was genuine. And so when he quotes it, we've changed that word to worship, and it's not. But so that's why I put yare in there. Yare is not a word, obviously, not always a word that's translated fear or reverence. It's used hundreds of times, and it is in almost every version always translated fear or reverence. And then when we bounced in a cross reference, a direct quote of the Isaiah passage, we somehow, for some reason, changed that word from fear to worship. And again, it's not even the word that the Old Testament uses for this idea of worship. It's a completely different word that I would never have even put in the study had there not been a direct quote and the use of the word worship in the New Testament. Otherwise, I just completely left it out. But I thought, well, we'll throw that bonus in there. All right, so that gets us over into the Greek, since we're already in the New Testament. There's a handful of words here as well. This first word is proskuneo, and it is the direct equivalent to shakah. And in the Septuagint, when they're translating shakah, it's pretty much always translated to proskuneo. Okay. So just like some of the other ones that we have seen where there is a direct correlation between two words, they mean the same thing. Proskuneo means exactly what shakah means. It means to physically bow, put your face on the ground. And it's a really interesting word because, as we know, Greek likes word pictures. Hebrew loves word pictures as well. Greek loves word pictures. And so what is the word picture of proskuneo? The word picture is actually, so pros and kineo. Pros means against, which is a prefix that we use, prosthetic, different words like that we have in English that come from Greek and Latin and that. Pros means against, and kineo means dog. And so they have the word picture of a dog licking its master's hands. And so they say the word literally means, when you put it together, to kiss the dirt. And so it's not even just this idea that shakah has of saying that you're bowing forward to show respect. The Greek adds in yet another kind of impact to this, where it's almost dramatic or even vulgar. You're kissing the dirt, not bowing, kissing the dirt. put your face on the floor, because you are dirt. You are like a dog licking their master's hand, in comparison to this. So this is compounding the relationship of this idea of worship. And so when the New Testament, 60 times that it's used in the New Testament. And so again, shakah and proskuneo, these are words that are used to describe this concept of just radical humility towards someone who you have determined is far superior to you. Far superior. So superior that you recognize that even being in their presence would lead you to death. The concept of the tabernacle. I mean, again, we got to get our brain in the same realm that the people who wrote this had in their brains. And so, this idea that God is, if we're looking at it in relationship to God, this idea that God is so powerful and so holy that our response to understanding his holiness, his purity, his power, and his grace, that he could justify us, the response to that should be full prostration. And if that's what worship means, I'm 100% on board. But that means we got to take it out of our music. We got to take it out of our offerings. We got to take it out of our church services. We got to take, because ain't nobody in any church I ever been to ever fell on their face for nobody. I've been to some churches where there are some shenanigans of that sort happening, but it is not out of reverence. It is out of maybe drug abuse. I'm not sure. I don't know why some of those people behave in the manners that they do in some of these churches with all the screaming and carrying on and hooting and hollering and jumping around. But it is not out of reverence. It is certainly not out of awe. It's out of chaos and probably some cocaine. Just a little bit, maybe some mushrooms. For those on the top floor. But those who are down on the bottom floor, it's just chaos down there. But yeah, so I mean, we introduced this idea of worship. I don't mind using the word. I don't mind, people using the word. But you have to understand that all of the things that have impacted us, all of the things that we have learned this year in the faith and the belief of who God is and what he has done, that he is so holy that even being in the same room is instantaneous death. And that has pushed us to the outside, and that he has designed all of history to bring us into a place where we can stand in his presence, go boldly before the throne of grace, and not die, but in fact, far to the opposite, where we thrive in that, where it transforms us in such a way that our just presence heals and transforms those around us. That should lead us to a place that puts us on our face. And that is worship. And if it's anything but that, it's not worship. If it is anything but that, it is not worship. It is not biblical. Which again is why I have hesitated for a very long time using the word worship, because again, when you use it, people think they know what you're talking about. And the problem is they don't. And so I've replaced that with words like homage and reverence, which is what the word actually means, which is what these words in the Bible actually mean. And technically, worship also is defined as reverence and homage, and then whatever else we want it to mean. And that's unfortunate. And I have a lot of friends who are big into the music scene. You were one of them. And so worship is a big deal. And worship in the church culture always means music. Except that in the Bible, worship never means music. It always means reverence and homage
Is
towards
that
something.
Potentially a negative thing in your mind?
I mean, Only a negative because it's not what it means, and Webster even left room for what behaviors do you do to pay homage? Do you have a feudal ceremony where you kneel and put your hands up and you get kissed by the Lord? Is it some sort of a memorized ceremonious thing? Do you do feasts and famines, and do you do, ceremonious things, Passover and all of that stuff, which are supposed to be signs of reverence to God? These are the reasons why we, I guess, do the Feast of the Unleavened Bread, and they do Jubilee, and they do Pentecost, and they do all of those rituals that are throughout the Hebrew calendar. They were all put in place to remember what God had done, so that they would always stand in reverence of who God was and what he did for them, except that it didn't end up that way. They still go through the motions, but the motions have nothing to do with anything, which was Isaiah's message, and why Jesus quoted it, was because those ceremonious things become just that, ceremonious things. And I think that, when the respect is demonstrated by something other than just actual being on your face and, being humbled, then it becomes something that just becomes rote. We sing all the songs out of reverence. There ain't nobody revering anybody in most of those rooms. Most people don't even sing it because they don't know the tune, or because the piano player missed a note, and then that's all they can think about, or whatever. But there's just so much to that just becomes, here's what we're going to do to show we have reverence, instead of just being in reverence. You don't have to show your reverence. It's not something you do. It's just respect. I mean, if you've ever been super humbled by somebody, because of their status or because of their presence or whatever, and you were just totally humiliated and were like, I'm not on their level, I need to just go somewhere else. That's reverence, that's homage. And if you don't have that response towards God because of your belief in the things that the Bible teaches, that we've learned all this year, then that's something you need to work on with God. But there's not something you need to start doing in order to, because again, our religious culture has led us down the path of we need to do something. We need to go out and minister. You need to go to the old folks' home. You need to pick up trash on the side of the road. You need to sing your songs. You need to go to church once a week, and you go to Bible study in the midweek. And you need to do all of these things. You need to minister. And this is how you show that you have a relationship with God, or that you have some sort of respect level for God, or that you have, whatever. And it's not. It's not. And unfortunately, the action ends up becoming the thing in place of the reverence, where we still talk about how much God is in control of everything and how much we respect him, but we don't actually live that way because we don't believe it. And that's why the belief is talked about so powerfully. That's why we started with belief, because that's where it all roots in. The belief is more significant than the actions. And Webster gave us the outlet of showing the reverence and homage through the actions, but God gave Israel that as well. And just like them, we've just taken the actions, and the actions become our way of proving that we have respect, as opposed to actually just having respect.
Question.
Weird.
Throughout like all the other Bible verses about like the singing and praises.
Yeah, I mean, make a joyful noise and rejoice within your heart.
Yes, I mean, there's those verses allude to that, but do they use some of those same words that you have, and maybe it got used
Not in relationship to those. And that's the other thing we found with a lot of other stuff, is that We're not saying that being joyful and singing joy. I mean, there are entire books that are dedicated to songs. I'm not saying that the Bible doesn't declare that singing praises to God is not an amazing thing, because the Bible declares that. What I'm saying is that when we give that its own definition, or when we, like a lot of these other words, we've taken stuff from over here and brought them under this, that's where we go wrong. So obviously the outpouring of joy, and we've talked about those words, that joy that's related to grace. So the outpouring of that gift, that benefit, is rejoicing. So rejoices should be the logical response to understanding grace, this benefit we've been given. That should make us joyful, because we recognize the significance of all of that. We should. And so, yeah, that's a powerful thing. And that should be a part of our life, is constant rejoicing. The problem is, biblically speaking, when we call that worship, it's not worship. Worship is physically bowing down to something as a show of homage or reverence. So, singing is a form of worship. No, it's singing. Worship is bowing down out of humility and respect. Singing is rejoicing. Rejoicing is the response to grace, and worship is the response to God's character. If he is up here and we are down here, and we recognize the significance of that, worship will take place. Worship is ultimate humility.
So
Rejoicing
what we do
is
in
response
morning
to grace
on
and
Sunday,
benefit.
It should be called rejoicing.
It should be called rejoicing. Yeah.
Rejoice.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk about grace hour. Let's talk about, whatever. Let's rejoice because of what he's done for us.
That puts a
It's
joyful-
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there is enough to be joyful for, but as we looked at when we saw charis, grace, that word is built from so many other different words, one of those being rejoicing. And that's a beautiful thing.
I think out the window it was.
Oh, it's the one where the sun is.
Separated.
I don't care if you feel better now that
Well, it was
you
in your eye. You
don't-
were like
well,
leaning
well,
over
I'm-
to get out of the
if it
way.
offends you, Tiffany, you
It
fix
doesn't
it.
offend me. I'm just trying to help you.
But yeah, so I mean,
Interesting.
so again, these are the ways that my brain differentiates all of these categories. Is like, is there some sort of theological problem? Are we some sort of anti-Bible heathen just because we lump all these things into the word worship? No, probably not. Opinion, maybe.
But you just
Reality,
want to know.
probably not. However, by lumping everything, do we get the value out of things that we could or should? Do we understand our position in reverence to God's position if we're thinking about music as worship? We don't. Do we get to understand what rejoicing and what joy and what grace are all about if we lump them into worship? No, we don't. And so by pulling these things apart and to pull things out of context, but in rightly dividing the word of truth and dissecting these things into its categories, is it necessary? I don't know if it's necessary or not, but I feel like it's important, which is, again, why I teach this way. Because I think that there's some really powerful concepts like joy and rejoicing and singing and all of that we're missing out on by calling it worship all the time. And I think we're missing out on a relationship of awe. We're missing out on a lot of awful relationships by lumping them into worship.
I'm sorry. I know what you're
I
saying.
know.
It's
I
just
threw it
that
out there
you
just
said
for
that
you,
on
Tiffany.
purpose.
Just for you.
Faded significance.
And because I knew that Serena would smirk at it because she enjoys my sick sense of humor. And you guys would, she rolls her eyes, she smirks, and then
So when I
you
do,
have to
you're
talk about it.
awful.
I know.
Yay.
I know.
Me.
Yeah, I had forgotten about that word. I'd mentioned that word years and years and years and years ago at one of my churches in a Bible study. And we pulled it out of Webster's and we did all that stuff as well. Because they were like, does awful actually mean awful or does it mean terrible? It's like, it actually means awful, full of awe. Where did we get? I don't know where we went wrong, but it literally means full of awe. It was super funny to me. But anyway, I had forgotten all about it until I rehashed with all of this. It's good stuff. But anyway, that's the purpose for doing that type of thing. Doing this dissection that we've done is because I truly feel like we miss some of the deeper pieces of the scripture by the generalizations. And that again, the goal is to make everything simpler so that everybody can understand it. I don't personally know if that's a word. I mean, as an educator, that's never a worthwhile goal. And not to make things more complicated, that's not the goal, but to understand that there is complexity and just to learn about the complexity. The way to teach complexity is not to make things simpler. It's to teach the complexity. And let other people simplify it in their own minds. It's not a requirement to just dumb things down. And I don't always try to use the word dumbing them down because that it adds a negative connotation that I don't think, and I've expressed that, I don't think that's present in all of this. Yes, there are some very dumbed down versions of the Bible. I don't think that in most of those cases, 99% of them, that the goal was to dumb them down. The goal was to simplify them so that every kindergartner in the world could read it. Her grandchild is an exception. He can read the Greek and the Hebrew. So at 3, he's an oddball. But you should teach him Greek and Hebrew. That would be
I'll
phenomenal.
cut right on that.
You should throw some random Greek or Hebrew letters at him and just see if he can sort it out.
Right.
That would be wild.
This is the one that never comes in public.
Yes. This
He's
group,
like aggressively like, hey,
I need to put
this
that.
group has changed him.
We have that
Kitty.
effect on things. All right, so let's jump back in. We'll get through these, and then that is it for this one. So that word proskuneo, that again, that's our bulk word. That's the one that means literally to kiss the dirt, get on your face. There is no room for misinterpretation with those two words. Okay, shaka and proskuneo do not give us room to be like, well, it's kind of figurative. No, there is no figurative. There's no mucking about with possible definitions of those words. They are very clear in their word pictures and in their literal definitions that it is a physical act of putting your face on the ground due to this massive level of fear and respect. All right, so latruo.
the Trio 3000. That sounds like some fancy.
I know, that's what I thought the same
Device or
thing.
something.
As soon as I typed it, I thought the same thing. I was like, man, that's like, we should sell that. The Latruo 3000. That would be awesome. Slices, dices makes Julianne.
Yeah.
So this word means to serve as hired. It's only occasionally translated as worship or worshiper, but it means service. Again, this is one of those things where you could go, yes, because worship is about serving people. And that's how we worship. No. The Bible has used a word that means to serve. We have taken that as something we want to lump in with the concept of worship. And so therefore we've translated it as worshiper. No, it is one who has been hired to do a job that they are qualified to do. Again, we can infer that worship is an act of service, but that'd be the backwards, illogical thing we've been trying to avoid. Other Greek writings, which of course we like to take a look at, some of the other writers of the time. There was lots and lots of literature that was written in Greek during this time frame. Lots of literature. all the philosophers and all that, they were all during this period, and they all wrote in Greek. But so those Greek writings, they translate this as servant for hire, which really has nothing to do with what our connotations of worship is. It is a servant for hire. So it's derived from the concept of idol practices, where the servants would tend to the fires and provide things for the idols, and is often used for this type of service, which is why it's related to the concept of worship. So there is a relationship there, because it is those people who, those servants in their loincloth with their chains and all that stuff. You know, I have a picture of the like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, thing. And there's like, they got the fiery furnace and they got, a big giant idol and everybody's bowing down to it. This is always the picture that runs through my head when I think about this concept. Well, who's lighting the fiery furnace? Who's keeping the furnace hot? Well, it's not the people who are bowing down. There are servants whose job it is to keep the fire going. There are servants whose job it is to take care of the idol and make sure it's standing, make sure it's polished, make sure it's this and this and that. That's latruo. That's latruo. These are servants for hire. It's just not exclusively for the tending to the idols, but these are the guys in the loincloths with the chains that are like, more sticks, and they're putting the sticks on the fire and making it hotter. Those are latruo, which, so you can kind of see where the meanings tend to get a little blended together. But latruo is not worshiper, as in someone who is bowing down. It's actually almost the opposite. They're not the ones bowing down. They're the ones making it happen, working in the background so that the worshipers can do the bowing down. The latruos are kind of the Marthas in the world of the Marys. The Marys are the ones bowing at the feet. The Marthas are the ones busy making sure that that's possible. Well, the Marthas are the latruos, and the Marys are, the proskynetos. Mary is bowing at the feet of her Lord. Martha is busy serving. Are they the same? Not even close. Not even close. Are they related? Yes, but they are not the same. And so this is another one of those ones that there's a really, really cool definition in there, but it's not this idea that we have of worship. And then sibamai, this word's only used 10 times. It means reverence. And so again, we're getting this idea that worship, the definition of worship is homage and reverence. So this is the way that it's used in the New Testament is always in the middle voice. So we talk about like active voice, passive voice, or middle voice. This word is always used these 10 times in the middle voice in the New Testament, which demonstrates a deep personal sense of awe or veneration. And so it's a beautiful, beautiful word. It's translated as worshiper or as a devout individual. So some versions will use the term devout individual, but mostly it's translated as worshiper, which to me is kind of a beautiful picture, but it goes back to this sense of deep awe and veneration. It is a phenomenally awful expression.
Sorry.
That's it. I get what I ask for every single time, and it just makes my heart smile. It's a beautiful thing.
He takes the time to look at each
Yeah,
other
Yep.
and make
he
sure.
does.
Make sure. I got to know if somebody's breaking the pattern, I got to know who's being nixed off the island. So
Maybe when the joke falls flat.
never will. We'll always get the response.
I will
that
always roll
ask.
my eyes.
You will
And
always
I will
roll your
always
eyes.
laugh.
Yeah, and she will
And I
always
will
smirk.
always
Yeah,
smirk.
it's fantastic. It's a beautiful thing. I have worked these patterns out over many, many months, and I am happy to have them. Consistency makes my heart smile.
I should off switch one day.
I feel like,
You already do that to every other part of my life. Leave this one alone. We're going to put this over here today. And then watch him try and find it for an hour. I don't know where it went.
I'm familiar with that.
All right. So my conclusion to all of this, let's remove the word worship like we should a lot of the English words. And let's look at the primary meaning that is present in the text. We don't always have to bunch up all the semi-related ideas and give a collective English term, especially when they translate to already existing words like homage and reverence. And these are phenomenal, phenomenal words. So as you go through the study and look at these different verses, enjoy them. Enjoy them as the meaning that they're for. Because again, we get this idea of worship in our head, and we want to make that meaningful because it should be meaningful. Worship shouldn't be meaningful. God should be meaningful. And worship relates to idols more often than it relates to God in the Bible. And I feel like that's where we end up. We turn the word worship into an idol, and we really want to focus on making it important. Worship should be important. Worship should be special. Worship. No. Get on your face.
Do you have an issue with what is intended for, like, at its root? Like, we are like, okay, we're preparing people, their hearts to hear, like, you know, getting their.
Well, that's
their-
just good public speaking.
Your
It's-
setting.
It's
Well, I know,
it's exactly what it is.
exactly,
Your
but I
your
mean,
mood
that's-
setting.
That's
And
kinda
in
what it
some
is.
ways, it's very important, and in some ways, it's very manipulative. Because good church has a beautiful flow, just like every good book: a good introduction, a good conclusion, and a beautiful flow of plot in between. And so when you leave, you walk out knowing exactly what experience you had. You feel the things you were designed to feel. You know the things you were designed to know, and you do the things you were designed to do as a result. The churches that don't understand that, does, well, because it's not about, we don't have to be fancy and we don't have to say good, important things. And we just, it's just all about Jesus. Well, what you're saying is you're ignorant and you don't understand how to do those things. And so then you fake it by saying, well, we don't need those things. It's all about Jesus. Except that good lesson plans, as a teacher well knows, are important. Because if you don't have a good structured lesson plan, then your kids are not going to know what they're supposed to know when they leave your class. Well, a church service should have a good lesson plan. And the mood is supposed to, if you want people excited, don't sing Kumbaya for 5 hours. Nobody's going to be excited about that. That's a somber thing. So you have to be doing the things that are required to get what you're designed to get. And it's often more manipulative than it is productive, because that's how humans do. But if what you want to do is get people to understand reverence and homage, then you should be talking about and singing about, in any style of music or mood, who God is and what he's done for us. Not just singing, God loves us, 487,000 times, because people are never going to get it. They'll walk away thinking, oh, I think God loves us. They don't know what that means. They don't know what agape is. They don't have any idea. There's no transformation that is taking place to give people an understanding of homage. I mean, if King Charles walked in this door right now, I'd fist bump him and be like, sup, bro? He's nothing to me. He is nothing. So, but a weird old dude in a weird outfit totally clashes. Okay. Those medals do not go with that sash, which do not go with the high-waisted coat. Okay. It's totally unstylish. He's just a dude. I've got no respect or reverence for him. I don't know him, and I couldn't care less about his position. That's how most of us are with God. It's cerebral at best, possibly experiential, but we don't have any reason to revere him. He's never done anything for us. Well, he saved you from your sins. What does that mean? I don't know what that means. Well, he's going to keep you from going to hell. Well, all I know is what somebody told me that hell is. I'm not sure if I believe all of that. And so he did that? Okay. I don't know. So I mean, we're trying to, I hate to use the word con, but we're trying to con people into reverence. You can't con people into reverence. You have to train them into reverence, which is why discipleship is so important. Because how in the world do British people know that King Charles is special? They've been raised that way. And they have experiences that when they didn't bow, when the dude was driving down the road, somebody pistol whipped them in the back of the head with an M16 and put them on their face so they were kissing the dirt. And they learn that through experience, through discipline, through life skills, that this was a person that they were to pay respect to, that they were to fear. When he walks by, you get on your face. They're not making that mistake twice. If he shows up in the building, they're on their face because they don't want that experience twice to show that they are disrespecting that man or that title or whatever, the crown, whatever. I don't know what they respect. Probably not the old dude. It's probably the crown and the title. But I don't have that with him. I wasn't raised that way. He means nothing to me. But he's a king. Not my king. I don't care. It's just a thing. So that level of reverence is raised into people. It's not sung into them. It's not preached into them. It's not even taught into them. Teaching is a much better place to start, but discipleship is the only way, which is incidentally why that was the method that Jesus said we had to be raising people. We had to teach this stuff to them through apprenticeship, through raising people, not through the rest of it. And so, I mean, it's why I have been passionate about that type of teaching and mentorship and stuff for a number of decades. It's why that dumb book has been on the back of my mind for the same number of decades. But that's why I feel like, when we talk about these things in this type of setting, it's still not even exactly where it needs to be, because we need to be walking with each other day to day. We need to be showing people what it looks like when you interact with other people, demonstrating agape to them, showing them, showing people, not telling people that when you leave here today, you need to go serve people and treat them like they're better than you. They go, oh, okay, yeah, sure, we'll get right on that. But they were really mean to me. They were stupid. They were rude. They're dumb. Yeah, they're humans. They're all stupid. All of us are stupid. On our best day, we're all stupid, which is why we recognize agape when we see it, because we all know we're all stupid. And the other stupid person who treats us like royalty, undeserving, that catches our attention. But you can't learn that unless you watch somebody else do it. Unless you watch Jesus feed those people from nothing and treat them the way he treated them and bless them and feed them and care for them and heal them. Why? Because they were so deserving? No, they're stupid people. They're no different than us. Why should we receive any of that stuff? They were just monkeying around hoping for free gifts in a light show. And he delivered almost every time. He gave them the act and the healing and all the things. And then they went home. But some people didn't go home. Some people kept following him to see what else he would do, following him to see what he did after the light show. After the stupid people left our office, how do we talk about them then? Is it still agape? Or did we revert back to the stupid people? Where is the real grace? That you can't teach that. You have to live that. And that's why discipleship is so powerful, because as we've walked through these last few months with these concepts that are so powerful, they are impactful to us personally. But to begin to transform our lives into what we have read the lives should be, a fount of water flowing that heals and cleanses the world. The light that shines into the darkness of this world. You can't just be like, put a bumper sticker on and we're rocking and rolling. That has to be raised. Reverence has to be raised. Worship is a concept that has to be raised. It can't be taught. You have to see it in action. You have to go to the parade where the king is walking down the street and everybody is on their face. And you're like, whoa, this is weird. Which is also why stories like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are so powerful. Because everyone was bowing. Everyone was worshiping these idols. But they recognized that God was greater than the idol, and they shouldn't stoop to put their face on the ground in reverence to this thing, because they were willing to put their face on the ground in reverence to him. And as a result, he blessed them, which was crazy and miraculous and the whole thing. But that's the picture. Where did they learn that? It wasn't something that they just had an idea that they were just being rebellious that day. It wasn't some sort of, teenage acting out because they were bored. It was raised into them. It was raised into them by their parents who grew up in Jerusalem, going to the temple. And when they were taken into captivity, they kept the traditions and the reverence of their God and who he was in their life. And they had this wild idea that if they were willing to stand up for him, they were willing to worship him, they might even get some benefit from that. Maybe even some saving from the punishment. But they said, but even if he doesn't, it doesn't matter. But what if? And of course, God followed through with that. He's like, what if? I'll show you what if. It'll be awesome. And Nebuchadnezzar came to know God. The king of idols, the king of the pagan world, came to know God because of people like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and Daniel. It's powerful, powerful stuff. But again, these are not things that they read in a devotional book in the morning. They didn't do their 5-minute and read their little verse, and then all of a sudden they became these people. It was raised into them. Who raised Daniel? Who raised Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Who raised David? Who raised Solomon? Who raised these people that did these things? They were all raised. So that's Foot Stomp number 987000,
Okay.
available on
Thank you.
tape, apparently. Whatever that means.
On tape. Oh my goodness.
Right.
Wow.
Available on cassette and DVD.
Oh, no.
I'm gonna use.
Shut up. I'm old. It's fine.
VHS.
All right. So the verses that are on here, the reason why there's so many of them is because, like we talked about them mostly, they're only 12 times it's ever mentioned in the Bible. I was like, well, why not just put all 12 of them? I mean, there's only 12. Just write all 12 of them. Yes, it takes up a lot of space, but there's only 12. So you'll notice some trends if you flip through there. For like Sagid, this is the one that's mentioned 12 times in Daniel. If you look at those verses, you'll notice that there's a little bit of a theme in there. He uses this word a lot. And no, I didn't have an Alzheimer's moment and put 3:15 in there on accident twice. It's because the word is used twice within that verse.
Oh.
You've got Isaiah 44:17 twice as well. Is that for the
You're
Sabbath?
welcome. Yes.
Oh, you did.
Yes. It is not because I've gone loony and lost my marbles. I'm not saying I haven't gone loony and lost
Okay,
my
there we
marbles.
go. There
What I
it
am
is.
saying is that the
Well, the
duplication is not because of the loss of the marbles. But yeah, so, and then the same thing with the Isaiah passage, which incidentally, they're all in chapter 44 within a couple of verses. So these people are having small conversations, or they have small bits of teaching within those books. And they happen to be just really mad foot stomping this concept. And then they move on to something else. The word's never seen or heard from again. In the whole Bible, it's never heard from again. So the other ones, I mentioned a handful of them. If you'll notice, I put some bold-faced things in there as well, like Matthew 4:10. The same verse uses two of the words that we often give credit for the concept of worship. And yet, in the same verse, meaning the same sentence that somebody is talking, they use both of those words and they don't mean the same thing by it.
Whoa.
So the words have different meaning. And the people who use them know they have different meaning and they use them that way. So, and then, yeah, and like the rest of them, I threw in a couple of things. I did underline that Matthew 15:9, which was that reference back to Isaiah that Jesus used. But so anyway, there's a ton of stuff in there. I mean, obviously, like those couple of things, to read that one chapter and get a context of how Daniel and Isaiah use those words won't take but a few minutes just to read it and see. You will probably not find the word worship in most versions, but you might. But just go back and look at the definition of that word and see, you know, what word you're probably gonna find, whether it's reverence or homage or servitude or, you know, something in there. But anyway. All right. We need to find a portly young lady to give us a note or two so that we will have the fat lady singing, because that's all she wrote. She's all done.
What?
That's the whole study in a very giant nutshell.
Wow.
I feel like you
Part
would have
two
gone a little bit
complete.
deeper.
I mean, I can next time.
Oh goodness. You did you really try?